Good afternoon to all of you, and a very warm welcome to all the participants in today's GeoMitra Scientific Seminar. I am Sharbhanu Ghosh. I am the Customer Relation Manager and your host for today's session. So to begin with, and continuing the tradition of the monthly JSS conducted by GeoMitra, we are here with another session bringing to you on the scientific topics. And we are thrilled to have our eminent speaker, Dr. Hazarika, all the way from Guwahati. Good afternoon, ma'am, and it's a real pleasure to have you today. So Dr. Hazarika will be speaking on the topic of CRP testing. Just to apprise all of you that this will be a scientific session and the presentation will be for 50 minutes. And at the concluding part, we will have a brief question and answer session. So please feel free to pop your questions in the question and answer box or in the chat box, and we will be delighted to take them during the end of the presentation. Also to apprise you that we will continue this particular forum in various other topics. So in the middle of this particular presentation, I will introduce a poll. So please feel free to give in your suggestions and updates accordingly. And we very much welcome to all of you to have a wonderful session on this particular topic. So to begin with, let me introduce to our eminent speaker. So a brief introduction about Dr. Hazarika. Dr. Hazarika has done her MBBS from Guwahati Medical College, and then she went on to do her MD from Assam Medical College. And she has an extensive career in microbiology. Currently, she's the assistant professor in Department of Microbiology at Guwahati Medical College. And over the years, she has excelled enough in the field of microbiology, and her research interest includes working on antimicrobial resistance and the antibiotic resistance, as well as on Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And she is also an eminent investigator under the DBT-sponsored projects, and she has indulged herself in taking out all the genomic approaches in that particular respect. So being a molecular biologist, I really appreciate, madam, that you have been constantly indulging yourself in the new realm. So before any ado, I will welcome Dr. Hazarika to start on with the presentation. So let me allow the screen sharing with you, ma'am. So I have enabled it, ma'am. It's all yours.
Is it okay now?
No, ma'am, it's not visible, ma'am.
It's wrong. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Is there any glitch, ma'am? I can help you out. Yes.
Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am. Perfect, ma'am.
So thank you so much. I'm Dr. Suranjana Chaliha Hajarika, Assistant Professor, Department of Microbiology, Guwahati Medical College. First of all, I'd like to thank Jamie Trent Company for giving me the opportunity to share this platform with you all. Today, I'll be speaking on the significance of CRP testing, the diagnostic challenges and remedies. So what is C-reactive protein? It is an annular pentameric protein found in blood plasma. It is a member of the pentraxin family of proteins. The circulating concentrations of CRP rise in response to inflammation, and CRP plays a role in innate immunity and acts as an early system against infections. So it's a very early marker for infectious and inflammatory conditions. The cyclic pentameric protein is comprised of 5 identical non-covalently attached subunits. Each subunit has a molecular disulfide bond. The molecular weight of each subunit is 23 kilodaltons. A phosphocholine binding site is located on the same face of each subunit. Now, regarding the synthesis of the C-reactive protein,
Ma'am, could you unmute, ma'am?
So it is the C-reactive protein is synthesized by the liver following interleukin-6 secretion by macrophages and fat cells. It is an acute phase protein. I've already mentioned that the synthesis of and secretion of C-reactive protein occurs in response to a wide range of acute and chronic inflammatory conditions. The release of interleukin-6 and other cytokines triggers the synthesis of CRP by the liver. A little bit about the history of the C-reactive protein. It was discovered by Tillett and Francis in the Syrah patients in 1930. By 1940, it was shown to be a protein and was given the name of C-reactive protein. Now, why this name C-reactive protein was given to this particular protein? It was so named because it was first identified in the serum of persons with acute inflammation that reacted with a capsular polysaccharide of pneumococcus. Thus, it was measured using the Quellung reaction. This is specific to the pneumococcus, basically, and it gave a positive or a negative result in those days. So it was only a qualitative test, not a quantitative test. Regarding the functions of the C-reactive protein, it binds to the lysophosphatidyl-choline expressed on the surface of dying or dead cells and some bacteria. And then it activates the complement system via the classical pathway. It also promotes phagocytosis by macrophages, which express receptors for the C-reactive protein. Thus, it clears the necrotic and apoptotic cells and bacteria. So if you can see here, the liver produces the C-reactive protein in response to inflammation. The C-reactive protein has ligands for calcium binding ligands. It binds to polysaccharides, lecithin, and nucleic acid of bacteria, fungi, and protozoa, and helps in clearing them. It also activates the classical complement pathway, and this leads to opsonization and lysis of the target cells and phagocytosis. So basically, the C-reactive protein helps in the clearing of dead and dying cells in the body, and as well as bacteria present in the blood. Now, what is the significance of the C-reactive test? Where can we do this test? So this test can be used under 3 conditions. Firstly, to detect the presence of infections in the body like pneumonia, sepsis, skin infections, etc. Then we can also use the C-reactive test to monitor the chronic inflammatory diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, etc. So these chronic diseases have flares in between remissions. So C-reactive protein can be used to monitor the progress of this disease. And also C-reactive protein can be used as a marker for cardiovascular diseases. It is the fastest responding acute phase protein. It is one of the earliest markers to appear in blood. The level rises above normal limits within 6 hours and peaks in 48 hours. So it is a very early marker which helps in diagnosis, not diagnosis exactly, it helps as a an estimation that the person might be suffering from some infections or inflammation somewhere in the body. The level increases 100-fold in infection, and so it is a very sensitive indicator. Moreover, as I've already mentioned, it helps in monitoring of chronic inflammatory conditions. But though it is a very sensitive marker, but it has no specificity. The level rises in a lot of infections, so we cannot pinpoint the infection, but it provides some preliminary information to clinicians regarding the presence of some infection or inflammation in the body. Regarding the range of CRP values, normally it is either negative or it is less than 1 milligram per dl, or some say that it is less than 10 milligram per liter is normal, but some references say that the normal is less than 2 to 3 milligram per liter, and beyond that, beyond 2 to 3 milligram per liter is pathogenic. But ideally, the usual consensus is that more than 10 milligram per liter indicates active inflammation. Now, CRP can be used to monitor a lot of chronic inflammatory diseases like Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatic fever, ankylosing spondylitis, Reiter's syndrome, psoriatic arthropathy, and Still's disease. So these are certain chronic diseases where the flares and remissions can be estimated by the CRP test. Moreover, the CRP test, as I've already mentioned, it is a very early marker to appear in blood in response to infection or inflammation. It increases in the first 12 hours of infection and falls within the first 2 or 3 days of the inciting event. Therefore, it can be used to follow response to therapy. So if a person is given antibiotics and the person is responding to that antibiotic, then the C-reactive protein falls, and we can do the estimation of the C-reactive protein to know the response to therapy. In case of people undergoing surgery, the C-reactive protein increases in the first 4 to 6 hours after surgery and gradually begins to decrease after 3 to 4 days post-operatively. If the level does not decrease even after 3 to 4 days post-operatively, then we can suspect that the person might be suffering from some infection in the body or pulmonary infarction. Usually post-operative infections can be identified with the help of the C-reactive protein. The C-reactive protein also helps in the differential diagnosis of bacterial meningitis versus viral meningitis. In case of bacterial meningitis, the C-reactive protein level becomes quite high, but in case of viral meningitis, the CRP is mostly normal or slightly increased. So we can differentiate between the two conditions with the help of the CRP test. The C-reactive protein is associated with increased risk of future coronary diseases like coronary artery disease, cerebrovascular disease, peripheral arterial disease. So now I'm going to give you a list of the conditions where we see an increase in the C-reactive protein. First comes inflammation, necrosis, or tissue injury. Then we have acute non-infectious diseases like arthritis, acute rheumatic fever, and Crohn's disease. Then collagen vascular diseases like lupus erythematosus and vasculitis. Then the CRP level also increases in acute myocardial infarction. An increase in the level is seen in bacterial infections like postoperative wound infection, urinary tract infection, tuberculosis, and meningitis. Then another condition where the CRP level is raised is pulmonary infarction. It is raised in malignant diseases. Then transplant resection, whether it might be kidney or bone marrow. Then acute rheumatic disease like rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatic fever, sees a raise in the CRP level. Then the CRP is increased in burns, which are complicated with infections. Then any infection in the immunocompromised patient sees a rise in the CRP level. And moreover, post-operative complications like subphrenic abscess or septicemia sees raised CRP. So the CRP test can be done to for the identification of all these conditions, though it is not very specific. While doing the CRP test, one thing has to be kept in mind. The use of steroids and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs can significantly lower the CRP level. So if a person is suffering from some infection or inflammation and they've been prescribed these drugs, then though the CRP level should be raised in these conditions, but because of these drugs, the CRP level might show a false negative test. So this thing should be kept in mind by clinicians when asking for the CRP test. Now, what is HSCRP test or high sensitivity CRP test? It measures very small amounts of CRP in the blood. It is mostly ordered for seemingly healthy people to assess the potential risk for heart problems. So in case of the HSCRP test, if the level is less than 1 milligram per DL, then it is considered to be low risk. That means the person has less risk of any cardiovascular disease. If the level is between 1 to 3 milligram per DL, then it is considered to be of average risk. And it is a high risk case if the level is more than 3 milligram per DL. The HSCRP test is a high predictor for myocardial infarction, stroke, peripheral vascular disease, and sudden cardiac death. The association is independent of age, smoking, hypertension, and diabetes mellitus. Now, this particular test, the HSCRP test, is a better predictor of the risk of cardiovascular disease than the other markers of such kind of conditions like LDL and cholesterol. So instead of going for the LDL cholesterol testing, we can prescribe the HSCRP test. The CRP increases in myocardial infarction and its level correlates with the level of the myocardial infarction enzymes. So if there's raise in the myocardial infarction enzymes, we see that there is also concomitant raise in the CRP. There have been lots of studies verifying this. But one thing should be kept in mind: the HSCRP test is only complements the evaluation of the classical coronary heart disease risk factor markers. They do not replace the other markers. So we can do the HSCRP test in concomitance with the other tests, but it's not that we'll do only the HSCRP test and not do the other markers. Moreover, HSCRP test has significant association for future risk of other metabolic conditions like diabetes mellitus and also hypertension. So if a person shows high HSCRP test positivity, then we can foresee that the person might be a candidate for diabetes mellitus and hypertension in the future. The HSCRP test adds to the predictive value of other cardiac markers to assess the risk of cardiovascular and peripheral vascular disease. Now, what are the different diagnostic platforms for measuring the CRP level? So previously we had the conventional methods. The different methods, amongst the different conventional methods, the latex agglutination had found the widest popularity. It was widely practiced. Even now it is practiced, this test is done in a lot of centers where more advanced facilities are not available. Then we have the newer platforms. Amongst them, the ELISA and the fluorescent immunoassay have found the widest acceptance and popularity. So among the conventional methods, the radial immunodiffusion was one of the popular methods that was used to detect the C-reactive protein. So here the agarose plates, which are incorporated with 1% rabbit anti-human CRP globulin were incorporated. Then wells were punched in the agarose plates and the test sample was put in the wells. If there is CRP present in the test sample, then there is reaction between the anti-human CRP antibody and the CRP, and precipitation rings were formed. The diameter of the precipitation rings determined the amount of CRP that was present in the test sample. So this is a semi-quantitative method. The main problem was that plates have to be, after the incorporation of the taste sample, the plates have to be incubated for a period of about 48 hours. So it took a long time. So that was the main drawback of this test. Then we have the latex agglutination test. Here, latex particles are incorporated with the anti-human CRP antibody. Then it's a kind of agglutination test. When the taste sample containing, probably containing the CRP and the anti-human CRP antibody were allowed to react, then agglutination occurred, which is actually a positive test. So here you can see agglutination between the two, and so there's a positive test. And here no agglutination occurred, so these are negative tests. So the latex agglutination test for CRP is also a semi-quantitative test, but it gained wide popularity because it can be done in a very short time, much time, and no skill was required. So it is a widely followed test. We also have the latex piezoelectric immune assay and the immunoenzymometric assays. So these assays were done previously, but they are no longer, but they also had lots of drawbacks. In case of the latex piezoelectric assay, the drawbacks, some of the drawbacks was that there was drawbacks with the labeling reporter molecules. And then in case of the immunoenzymometric assay, there was drawback regarding the enzyme stability, the shelf life, and the time taken for detection. So all these drawbacks decreased the popularity of these tests. And then in recent years, various biosensor-based detection systems have been attempted for quick, sensitive, and on-site detection of the C-reactive protein. A biosensor is an analytical device utilizing a biological reaction between receptor and target molecules. It converts the biological response into readable and quantifiable signals. Now comes the ELISA. This is the main platform which is used for CRP testing. It is a dominant immunoassay platform in the laboratory setting. It has high sensitivity and specificity. It enables the processing of a large number of samples at the same time. It leads to in vitro quantitation of CRP in the human serum or plasma. So there is quantitation of CRP. We can measure the exact level of CRP in the patient's serum or plasma. Now the principle of ELISA. It is based on the principle of sandwich ELISA. The microvilles are coated with the capture antibody. Then a patient sample which contains the target analyte is added to the microville. Then if the patient sample contains the target analyte, it will attach to the capture antibody. Then this is followed by addition of the detection antibody, which is conjugated with the enzyme conjugate. So if the patient had CRP in the serum, then this will bind to the enzyme conjugate, the antibody containing the enzyme conjugate, and this will be detected by the enzyme conjugate. Then there is incubation. This incubation is according to the kit manual, and this is followed by a washing step. The washing is done to remove any unbound components. Then there is addition of substrate. The substrate addition leads to color change in the enzyme conjugate. And this is stopped after some time. The color intensity that is produced on addition of the substrate, this is directly proportional to the amount of CRP that is present in the sample. So this is these are the basic steps of the ELISA, but we have to follow regarding the time for incubation, and every step has to be followed according to the manufacturer's kit's manual. So here, this is the capture antibody. This is fixed to the microville plate. Then this is the serum, the CRP, if it is present in the patient's serum, it is captured by the capture antibody. Then on addition of the detection antibody, it will attach to the CRP antigen, and the detection antibody is attached, it is conjugated with the enzyme conjugate, and on addition of substrate, there is color change. So in this particular use, we can see that there is color change. So CRP was present there. According to the intensity of the color, the ELISA reader will quantify the amount of CRP present in the sample. Now, during specimen collection and preparation before ELISA, some things have to be kept in mind. Human serum or plasma samples are usually used for ELISA testing. The specimens should be free of microbial contamination. The test is best performed with fresh samples, but if it's not possible to do the test at that particular moment, then the samples may be stored at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade for about 1 week. And if the samples cannot be processed within 1 week, then they have to be stored at -20 degrees centigrade or lower. But we should avoid repeated freezing and thawing of these samples. Then a very important thing that should be kept in mind is that all the samples that are to be tested should be handled as though capable of transmitting infection. That means while processing the samples, all the universal precautions that are to be maintained in a laboratory while doing ELISA are to be followed. Like the person should wear gloves, then there should be no pipetting by mouth, then there should be no eating, drinking, or smoking in the lab area. The person should wash his hands thoroughly with soap and water after finishing the test. Then if the person has any cut or wound on his hands, then he should not do the test. Then if there's all the reagents and the samples are to be disposed of in accordance with the established the protocols that are followed in the institute. And if there is any spillage, then it should be decontaminated with 1% sodium hypochlorite solution. And if there's any contact with ice, then a physician should be consulted immediately. So all these precautions are to be followed while dealing with the test samples in ELISA. Some important points during ELISA: then we should not use kit components beyond the expiry date. All reagents and samples are to be brought to room temperature before use. We should not combine the reagents from different batches. Then microbial contamination of reagents are to be avoided. Then we should use sterile disposable tubes while removing aliquots from reagent bottles. And separate tip should be used for each sample. So these things, these steps, points should be kept in mind while doing the ELISA. There are certain other steps, like all pipetting steps should be performed with accuracy. Then kit instructions are to be followed accurately. Evaporation during incubation can be prevented by covering the strips with strip sealer. Distilled or deionized water must be used for wash buffer preparation. Then the substrate solution, the working substrate solution should be prepared just 10 minutes prior to adding in the wells. It should not be prepared beforehand. And while doing the assay, strong light exposure should be avoided. So it should preferably be done in a dark area. Now, ELISA has all the advantages. It has high sensitivity and specificity, but it also has certain disadvantages. One disadvantage is that it is time consuming. It takes some time to perform the ELISA test. And then it has moderate to high complexity that requires skilled personnel. So ELISA can't be done by anyone and everyone. They have to be trained for it. And the test is typically equipment intensive. So we need the ELISA reader, we need the ELISA washer, so equipment and laboratory setup, proper laboratory setup is required. It cannot be done at the bedside of the patient. So it is not suited for point of care use. So now let's discuss about some point of care tests. Effective therapy is only possible when disease is diagnosed quickly and reliably. In recent years, there has been a trend towards diagnosis at the place of treatment or the point of care. This includes tests during the initial examination of admitted patients, large-scale screenings, doctors' house calls, and self-diagnostics. The point of care test systems make analysis less costly and much faster. So they can be done quite fast, we save time, and also they're less costly. They quickly provide information necessary for making further decisions. So point of care tests have certain advantages, like they're much faster and they're less costly. So while developing the point of care test, the lateral flow immunoassay platform was developed. The steps of this lateral flow immunoassay platform is that there is the use of capillary migration in cellulose acetate sheets as the structural foundation for an immunoassay, and also the ability to couple antibodies to various reporter nanoparticles for the quantitative estimation of CRP. So firstly, there is capillary migration in the card strip, and also the antibody, we have to develop antibodies conjugated with different reporter molecules to read the test. So this lateral flow immunoassay test is simple and fast. Quantitative analysis can be done in a broad range from as little as 0.1 milligram per liter to above 150 milligram per liter. So they can be used to detect both infections and inflammations, as well as they can be used to detect the low-level CRP that we require to do in order as a marker for cardiovascular diseases. They're adequate for detecting CRP of both acute inflammatory conditions and cardiovascular diseases. And the complicated washing steps are avoided here. The operating procedures can be done by non-professionals. No special skill is required. There is good reproducibility and stability. And the most important thing is that they are very fast. They can be completed within minutes. From 3 to 30 minutes, they can be completed within this short time. So the principle of the lateral flow immunoassay is that it consists of layers of membranous sheets which are backed by a cardboard to give stability to the test strip. Then the patient sample is put in the sample pad, and by capillary action, the sample flows along. While flowing along, the sample passes through the conjugate release pad, which contains in this case, it contains the anti-CRP antibody, which is conjugated with some detector molecule, which might be latex, it might be colloidal gold. So all these different detector nanoparticles can be conjugated with the anti-CRP antibody. Then if the CRP is present in the patient sample, it will bind with the conjugated antibody, and then this bound complex will then flow into the detector zone. So this is the detector zone. In the detector zone, the anti-CRP antibody is immobilized here, and the complex that will be flowing in will be detected in the detector zone by the complex, by the anti-CRP antibody that will be immobilized here. And if it's a fluorescent dye that has been conjugated, then there will be different intensity of the line. So, and this line can be read by a reader later on. And then we have a control line which appears, it indicates that the complex had flowed in properly without any hitch. And ultimately, the intensity of the detector molecule determines the amount of the CRP that was present in the patient's serum. So different labels can be used in lateral flow immunoassay. We can use colloidal gold. It is low cost, and it's also a very stable nanoparticle, stable detector molecule. Latex can be used. The latex can be tagged with various detector reagents like fluorescent dyes, magnetic particles. Then carbon nanotubes can be used. Then some other fluorescent nanoparticles which are commonly used are quantum dots, fullerene, etc. So these are different detector molecules that can be used in the lateral flow immunoassay. Traditionally, these lateral flow immunoassay tests were used for qualitative analysis. Here, the conclusion was given based on visual evaluation of the staining, but it was subjective. Over the past decade, series of affordable and compact detecting devices have been developed for registration and quantification of the immunochromatographic results. The development of the use of these detecting devices does not significantly make the test more complicated. So it's not that use of these detecting devices will make it complicated. In fact, it has eased the reading of the test. So different optical signal registration methods have been developed. The basic principle is that light sources are focused on the test light, and light is reflected by the test surface through a system which focuses the light on the detector system. The detector system then registers the image, the intensity that is focused on the detector system, which then the information is analyzed in a machine, the reader machine, which will have the software for reading the signals. So basically the signals are sent through to the registering device, and then ultimately to the analyzing device, which will analyze the intensity of the signals, and then quantification of CRP will be done based on those signals that are received by the reading device. The specialized tools for optical detection system, these have been developed for the lateral flow test. This automatic work enhances the measurement objectivity. The majority of these detectors can quantify the analyte content based on the light intensity. One thing is that most of these detector manufacturers supply their own test strips, which are adapted to be used in combination with the detectors. So this package approach gives better quality result. Now, quantitative assays can be done also with magnetic reporter molecules. One advantage of the magnetic reporter molecules is that in case of the optical detection, the molecules at the surface only can be detected. But in case of the magnetic detection, the magnetic reporter molecules all throughout the surface of the surface can be detected. So this is one advantage of the magnetic detection. Now, amongst all the point of care platforms, the fluorescence immunoassay has found the widest acceptance. It is a sensitive immunoassay for quantitative determination of CRP in human serum or plasma. Basically, the basic principle is that it's a lateral flow chromatographic immunoassay, which is where the fluorescent substance is where the detector molecule is a fluorescent substance. So it's a lateral flow chromatographic fluorescence immunoassay. The fluorescence that is emitted is analyzed by a fluorescent immunoassay analyzer. And it gives quantitative tests, the sensitive quantitative results. The sensitivity is quite high, and a broader detection range. It has a broader detection range compared to some other tests. So basically, fluorescence immunoassay is a type of lateral flow immunoassay where the detector molecule is a fluorescent substance. So we can see here that the sample has been, this is the strip, the card where the sample has been put. The detector molecule is a fluorescent dye. So there'll be fluorescence in the test line. This is put in the reader, and ultimately the result can be obtained, and the amount of CRP that is detected is in accordance with the intensity of the fluorescence that is read by the reader. A little bit about the principle of fluorescence immunoassay. It is based on the principle of sandwich fluorescence immunoassay. So it uses anti-CRP antibody immobilized on nitrocellular strip. When the test sample is added to the sample well, the fluorescence labeled CRP antibody binds to the CRP antigen in the test specimen, forming antigen-antibody fluorescence labeled complex. The complex then migrates along the nitrocellulose membrane by capillary action. It is the CRP antibody is immobilized on the nitrocellulose membrane, and this complex then binds to that CRP antibody, and it forms a fluorescing immunocomplex. And this the signal that is emitted by this immunocomplex can be it's read by the analyzer. It is interpreted by the analyzer in terms of milligram per liter, and it's a quantitative analysis. Now, while doing the fluorescence immunoassay, even here, certain things have to be kept in mind. The CRP cards should be stored at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. We should not use beyond the expiry date. Then the sample should not be frozen and must be protected from, the cards should not be frozen and must be protected from exposure to humidity and direct sunlight. We should use separate micropipette tips for adding each sample. We should not tamper with the QR code. This is very important. We should not put stickers or something like that over the QR code. Then precise pipetting, then maintaining the required temperature and exact reading time is a must. Good result. The sample should preferably be tasted within 24 hours of collection, and if that is not possible, and we should avoid repeated freezing. Nowadays, miniature devices have entered the market, which have all the features of optical registration for lateral flow test strips. The results are shown in a yes or no format, and all the controls and digital data processing the results can be accessed through a smartphone or a computer via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So we can carry this device anywhere. Once we get a yes answer that CRP is present, then we can connect this device to a smartphone or a computer to get the quantification of the CRP that is present in the patient's serum. Now I'd like to present a few case studies before you. The first case study is regarding a patient in his late 40s who has fever, is coughing, has shortness of breath, and is generally feeling unwell. He asked to be prescribed antibiotics so that he can return to work quickly. On examination, his heart rate was 90 beats per minute, and his respiratory rate was 22 breaths per minute. On auscultation of the lungs, it was revealed that the patient had some diffuse wheezes and clear rhonchi. Now, in this patient, what pathway should we choose? Should we prescribe antibiotics to this patient because he himself wants antibiotics so that he can, because he has the concept that he's having some kind of infection, and once he gets the antibiotics, he can return to work quickly. So if I give some antibiotics to this patient, the patient will be happy. But statistics have revealed that 90% of respiratory tract infections are caused by a virus. And in these cases, antibiotics are unlikely to have any clinical benefit in such patients. So it is often seen that if a patient comes to you with signs and symptoms, immediately the patient is given antibiotics, he goes home, irrespective of whether he had some bacterial infections which required antibiotics, or he had some other infections which did not require antibiotics, he'll get better in time and he'll think that antibiotics have worked. But in such cases, resistance develops. So in such cases, we unnecessarily expose the patient to a patient's natural flora to antibiotics, and this enhances the chance of resistance. And moreover, because of indiscriminate use of antibiotics, there might be a chance of developing kidney damage, and also healthcare associated infections like Clostridium difficile because indiscriminate use of antibiotics. So in such cases where we are uncertain whether it might be due to a bacterial infection or some other infections, so we can perform a CRP test at the bedside, or a doctor doing a visit can also do this test by resorting to the point of care test. We can perform a finger stick sample test, and then the result will be obtained within minutes. In the case of this particular patient, the CRP level was found to be 16 milligram per liter. So which was not a significantly high CRP level. So a significantly increased CRP level may indicate the need for immediate antibiotic treatment. And on giving the treatment, the CRP level decreases rapidly in response to effective therapy. But in this case, since the CRP level was not too high, it was very less, only a minimal increase in the CRP level. So it was not thought that the patient required antibiotics. A normal or a moderately raised CRP may support a diagnosis of viral or self-limiting unnecessary antibiotic prescriptions. So the patient, in this particular patient, was educated on the expected course of the disease, that he will recover no matter whether he's given antibiotics or not. And then he received instructions for reconsultation, and satisfied and reassured, this patient returned home. So in this case, we could prevent the unnecessary use of antibiotics because of the use of the CRP test. So in such cases, the point of care tests become very convenient because they give the results in a very short time. Now, another case study, this study was done on a neonatal population. Now, neonatal sepsis is considered as the leading factor for neonatal mortality and morbidity. Early diagnosis is very important as it helps in beginning antibiotic therapy. Blood culture for the sepsis cases, and it is still considered the gold standard method for diagnosis of neonatal sepsis. But blood culture can detect the pathogen in only 25% of cases. So it is not a very sensitive test. Moreover, it gives false negative results, especially due to the use of antibiotics. So if the blood sample is taken after starting antibiotics, then it might give a false negative result. Moreover, another disadvantage of the blood culture test is that the cultures take a time of 2 to 3 days. So there is a delay for 2 to 3 days. So because the blood culture reports do not arrive in time, the neonates are subjected to broad spectrum antibiotic treatment empirically until the sepsis can be excluded. Then antibiotic overuse favors the development of resistance. So very often it is seen that because blood culture takes a long time, the report takes a long time to come, and moreover, because it is not a very sensitive test, though it is very specific, but it's very less sensitive. So empirically, we give broad spectrum antibiotics to those neonates because we do not know whether the cause is actually sepsis or some other causes. And so there is antibiotic overuse, which favors the development of resistance. Studies have shown that sepsis markers like C-reactive protein improve sepsis diagnosis. It is useful in excluding infections in suspected cases and enables earlier discontinuation of antibiotics. So if we get the CRP result in time, then we can exclude sepsis in neonates and we can discontinue antibiotics. Moreover, it is cost effective because the taste of the cost is very less. And moreover, it decreases the development of resistance and hospital stay duration. Now, a cross-sectional study was done over a period of 6 months. The study included 15 neonates with suspected sepsis admitted to the neonatal intensive care unit in clinical examination and routine laboratory investigations. Blood cultures were done aseptically before starting the antibiotics. And along with blood culture, we also did PCR of the samples in order to detect the 16S DNA. That means we simultaneously did blood culture as well as we tried to detect the presence of bacteria by the 16S DNA PCR, which is more sensitive, much more sensitive than blood culture. And moreover, the CRP test CRP was measured using fluorescence immunoassay. Now the results. The blood culture was positive in 31 of the 50 cases. Amongst them, 2 were negative in PCR. The bacteria was detected, the 16S DNA was detected in 39 neonates and 10 were negative in blood culture. The studied neonates were divided into 2 groups. The group 1 consisted of those neonates which were positive in which were both positive in either blood culture or PCR. That means they are proved sepsis cases, and the group 2 which were negative in blood culture and PCR, so they are suspected cases. And the median CRP level was found to be 48 milligram per DL. And it was seen that the CRP levels were elevated in a significant manner in the proved group than in the suspected cases. That means the CRP level, there was concomitant increase of the CRP levels in the sepsis group. This was a very significant finding. Now the take-home message. Our understanding of CRP detection systems has come a long way. Over the years, CRP has become a versatile inflammatory marker for the detection of systemic inflammatory conditions. Advancements in interdisciplinary approaches will be helpful for the quick ultrasensitive analysis of this marker. Attempts should also be made to develop new CRP recognition molecules and new materials to develop more sensitive sensing platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for this elaborate presentation which you have given on CRP. And I think you have discussed all the, what you can say, the pros and cons of all the diagnostic platforms and also the significance of the test itself. Now, obviously, I do have a few questions which are lined up for you. The first thing which people are asking is, you have mentioned that CRP itself can be used as a collateral marker with other cardiac markers. Now, having said that, you have stressed the fact about myocardial infections and also with respect to the coronary artery diseases. So now, how do you relevantly put CRP in the bracket of, in that panel of cardiac marker test itself?
Actually, it has been found by several studies that where there's rise in the other cardiac markers, there's also concomitant rise in the CRP. Lots of studies have been done and they've seen that in such conditions where there is increase in the other markers of coronary artery disease, there is also, they've done the studies and they've found that CRP also increases in this. Lots of studies they've done. So they have said that we cannot rely on CRP alone. It can be done in a very short time. So we can do this test as a preliminary, to have a preliminary idea. But it is not that we'll avoid the other markers. So they'll be used in concomitance together with the other markers.
Okay, ma'am, let me understand this, because the follow-up question is that obviously in a country like India, where the socioeconomic strata plays an important role in the lifestyle of the people, and it is, we do have different income groups, and obviously the intake of food also matters a lot. Now, having said that, you have mentioned about the lipid profile and the cholesterol levels. So obviously, what you can say, the lifestyle habits, these levels will keep on fluctuating. Okay. Now, if you take the whole cholesterol level on one side, you do have lipoprotein on one side, and then you have CRP. How do you correlate that, what you can say, a routine, for example, a person goes for a routine checkup, for example, lipid profile is very much common these days. How do you think a routine checkup of cholesterol has to have some kind of implications with respect to CRP testing?
The CRP doesn't have any relation with cholesterol, but CRP has some relation with the inflammatory conditions that might be occurring in the heart, as a result of which myocardial infarction might occur. So there's no direct relation between cholesterol and CRP, but cholesterol also has a relation with future cardiovascular diseases, and CRP also has relation with future cardiovascular diseases. And lots of studies have stated that CRP, in fact, if we do the CRP test, it is more valuable than looking for the level of LDL and cholesterol. But those two are not related. Independently, they signify some future.
Yeah. Exactly, ma'am. Now, there is one more thing. Now, having said that, we have in the past few months, we have observed that people have been talking about the so-called a parallel marker of COVID diagnosis. Now, apart from the direct diagnosis of COVID infection, people have been going for various other markers like CKMB, which you have mentioned, and other things. Now, just recently, as of today also, the publication has come that the government is actually introspecting about studying the various clotting factors which are happening just due to the vaccination and everything. Now, taking the stance of COVID mechanism and all the diagnosis, which is actually coming into new dispensing modules, how do you think CRP is going to be vital enough in COVID diagnosis?
CRP can help in understanding about the severity of the COVID infection. So I've found certain studies where they've said that if there is, the COVID infection is a viral infection, but if there's any bacterial super infection in such a patient, then the CRP level will be raised. And this, if there is, bacterial super infection in such a COVID case, then that person, the disease takes a serious turn. So by looking at the CRP level, we can have some idea that the particular person suffering from COVID might, go towards, worse condition. So by looking at the CRP level, we can have some idea whether the disease will be more severe in such a patient or it will be self-resolving. It will recover. The patient will recover without much damage.
The understanding what I have, ma'am, with respect to the publications which are already coming, I mean to say every day we do have loads of publications coming in, and the picture is quite sketchy as of now, because in certain places the vaccination has not taken that much of what you can say response also. But going through your experience with respect to the vaccination which has come across, and the understanding what you have through your own institution being a government setup, how do you think that the Indian population is actually going to have what you can say so-called the adverse reactions with respect to the vaccination, and whether CRP should be used in the near future or not in this kind of a population?
That is very difficult to say actually. We are all hoping that the vaccination campaign will be successful. So right now, I will not say that the vaccinations, there'll be adverse reactions and all that. But yeah, the CRP test can be done because it's a very cost-effective test. So there's no harm in doing the CRP test. Will give if there's any, inflammatory conditions in the patient who had taken that vaccine. So CRP test can be done to have some idea.
Okay, the other part is you have mentioned about the various pros and cons of all the diagnostic platforms, including ELISA, then the LFIA, and also with the FIA. Now, having said that, there is one important thing which you have covered is with respect to the sample conditions. Okay, that it should not be repeatedly thawed and frozen also. Now, coming to the practical purposes, if you talk about, like, there are two types of setup, like the institution, what you have a dedicated infrastructure is there, people are coming every day. Now, in remote areas, obviously, I don't know what would be the real time scenario over there. So it takes a lot of time, and God knows what status the samples do arise. So what would be your ideal, what you can say, suggestion to all the practical purposes, that one thing should be the gold standard and it should not be compromised? Because like, you have also mentioned the case study of neonatal cases. Now I'm just taking a cue from there, and which are very much prevalent in remote areas. So how would you take into that consideration?
So if they purchase the point of care test, if that can be, the ELISA setup is it cannot be put everywhere. It cannot be established everywhere. Trained personnel is required. In our setup, we can do the ELISA very easily, and we get lots of samples per day. So there's another thing. It is cost effective that way. And moreover, we have trained people, but the ELISA setup, though it is more specific and sensitive, so it's a better platform, but it cannot be established everywhere. So in those places where that is not possible, so they can resort to the point of care test, the lateral flow immunoassay. So that is less costly, and trained people are not required. And so that setup can be done. That is also quite sensitive. And it can be carried everywhere.
Okay.
It's a portable system.
Yeah, I understand, ma'am. And ma'am, how would you rate immunoturbidometry in measuring CRP quantitatively?
That is also quite sensitive.
It's quite sensitive, ma'am. Okay, and ma'am, vis-a-vis with respect to all the government setups, because ma'am, see, now every setup is obviously having ELISA. Okay, because that is a standard choice now. Now, having said that, if we have to move in future, okay, now if you talk about FIA and other things, what do you think that which would be the better conjugate with respect to all these tests, whether it would be the latex conjugate or the gold nanoparticles?
The gold nanoparticles all have different advantages. The gold nanoparticles, the intensity is quite high. It's very easy to read. But the latex can be conjugated with different reporter molecules. So that is one advantage of the latex particles. So I think it differs. But both gold and latex are useful. I mean, they are good reporter molecules.
Okay. And ma'am, to conclude, one last question to you, ma'am. Ma'am, what do you think as the best possible method of bringing the CRP levels back to normal, whether it would be through the diet or whether it would be under the constant supervision of the antibiotics only?
I mean, like CRP level, if it's a case of infection, it's a case of sepsis, for example, then if we give antibiotics, the CRP level comes down rapidly. So in such a case, the CRP should be given. I mean, in such a case of sepsis, antibiotics should be given. But we have to decide whether the antibiotics are really required or not. So first we have to identify the cause. What is causing the raise in CRP? So inflammatory conditions or where we are not sure, like CRP is not, it just gives a preliminary idea to the clinician. It's not specific. So once we realize the cause, if it is due to sepsis and the CRP level becomes quite high in those cases, so we can start antibiotic therapy, the CRP will come down. So the CRP level is not so high, then we can wait and see. We can have some idea that antibiotics immediately are not required. It's not a case of sepsis. We can, it's not a case of bacterial sepsis. We can do some other, it might be a viral cause of the disease. The cause might be viral. So we can wait and see and come to the diagnosis after we do some other specific tests. So the CRP test is useful because it gives preliminary idea to the clinician whether it's a case of sepsis or some other conditions, which is, gives a differential idea about the differential diagnosis actually.
I think, ma'am, you have covered all the points which are very much relevant to the, what you can say, the pre-pandemic as well as the post-pandemic levels. And I think your studies are also what you have catered to a large plethora of patients, whether it is the adult age groups or the neonatal cases. So I think people will definitely get enlightened with the idea of how to deal with the inflammations and also with the allied ailments which are related to it. Nevertheless, you have also highlighted that what needs to be done as far as the testing platforms are concerned, whichever is there at the disposal of the people. And you have highlighted the pros and cons of it also. So it's wonderful to have a scientific discussion on this particular topic, which is rarely discussed. And I can't thank you enough for bringing it over here. So before I conclude, you please allow me to share the screen, and there is a token of appreciation for you, ma'am. And so this is a token of appreciation, ma'am, and we really like to present to you on behalf of JMITRA. And this is just a virtual certificate to you, but surely in a few days' time, you will get a hard copy of it. One of our team members will reach out to you and present to you, ma'am. And it was a wonderful experience to learn more about this particular testing, all the way from diagnostic implications to the challenges which you have faced, ma'am. And I really look forward to have you in near future also, and to learn more about some new other markers. So thank you, ma'am. And thank you to all the participants. And it was wonderful to have all of you today. And just to apprise, we will be continuing this particular tradition of hosting the JSS every month. And as usual, please stay tuned. Till then, it's very good evening from my end. And thank you and have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.